Hi everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Barclay with me, Jez Davies. I'm joined with my co-host Morgan. How are you, Morgan?
Hello, I'm very well. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Very excited about our guest today. Certain Adrian Coote, who used to play for Norwich back in the day. Hi Adrian, how are you?
Afternoon, gentlemen. I'm good, thank you.
Hello.
Excellent. So if you just like to, just for obviously the listeners that don't know, there won't be many. But if you just like to introduce yourself, what you do for, what you did previously, what you do for a living now, and perhaps some of the stuff that you do with Radio Norfolk.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Adrian Coote. Obviously, just mentioned that, but AD, as I go by. Joined Norwich as a YTS or youth team player back in 1995 now when I left school. Signed pro forms, made a debut in 97 and then left in 2001 after about 80 appearances, joined Colchester and spent a couple of seasons there.
Nice.
Before heading to Dereham Town, which we'll talk about later.
Of course, yeah. And what are you up to these days, Adi?
So I work in a school local to me, special educational needs school, children with social, emotional and mental health needs. Overseeing a group of primary children, currently on half term. So, just feels a little bit less eventful this week. It's been quite a quiet week. So, all charging the batteries before we go back on Monday.
And you're with the boys at Radio Norfolk on Saturday.
Yeah. So back on doing the co-coms with Chris and then Canary Call with Rob for the Stoke game, which I'm massively looking forward to. Love catching up with those guys, but obviously love watching Norwich play as well. So not been a lot to shout about in recent weeks. I thought we were a run of 10 games where we could pick up quite a lot of points, but we've had 3 of them and we haven't picked up very many. So chance to turn it around on Saturday. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, absolutely. In typical Norwich fashion as well, isn't it? We sort of went into those games thinking, we might pick up some points here, as you alluded to, and I think it hasn't really, for whatever reason, hasn't happened. I think the last minute goal, Morgan, correct from wrong here, Derby, right?
Yeah,
really shook us a little bit for the following games, but. Yeah, so I mean, just touching on your sort of early career, then, AD. Obviously, you mentioned you signed the YTS scheme. Where were you previous to that, and how did Norwich find you?
So obviously, been a local lad. Born in Norfolk, lived in Norfolk, went to school in Norfolk. Played football. I mean, back in them days, they didn't have under 6s, under 7s, or anything like that. You started football at under 11s. That was the earliest age you could play. So I played for a team local to me. And then I think they did something at the end of each season where each club in the Norfolk and Suffolk Youth League would send a couple of players to Trouse. So you'd have a big congregation of players and they'd have 5 or 6 of their youth team coaches putting on drills and stuff like that. And it was just a chance for each team to send a couple of players that they thought might have a chance. And at the end of it, they either give you a letter saying thanks for coming, see you next year, or they invited you back to what was then the sort of centre of excellence, a couple of training sessions each week, and then games on a Sunday against fellow professional teams, under 12s, under 13s, and that's kind of where it started for me, really. I joined Norwich at under 12s with Sammy Morgan and then Mike Sutton as a coach. Both great guys, both big influences in that early part of my journey. And just great experiences. I mean, we didn't go all over the country. We played the sort of southeast teams, but yeah, I just remember getting on a train from Yarmouth to Norwich really early on Sunday mornings, jumping on a minibus packed with kit bags and players, absolutely stunk, and then drove down for 11 or 12 o'clock kickoff, depending on how far we had to travel. Southend, Ipswich, Peterborough, West Ham, Fulham, all the London teams and sort of teams local to us, and we'd have our home games up at the UEA Sports Park as well. So great memories.
So the just out of interest, the UEA Sports Park, because they didn't have it at Colney or what?
No, so my first year as a YTS, so that would have been 95, was the first year that Colney was opened.
Oh, right, okay.
So if I remember that rightly, I can remember it all being at Trouse, the Centre of Excellence training being at Trouse.
Right.
The youth team I'm talking about the under-18 youth team, the team that Keith Webb used to run. They always played their games up at Trouse. But yeah, all the youth team fixtures, the home games were played over at the UEA.
Oh, wow.
They had about 4 pitches over there. I remember one being on a plateau, which was quite nice to play on. And then, to sort of bring it all the way back round to the UEA when we signed YTS and Pro, that takes back there pre-season and just literally run us around the lake. And so you'd catch odd glimpses of the football pitch you used to play on with each lap that you ran. But again, all good experiences and good memories.
So touching on that, I mean, we'll dive into some of the questions. And what are some of your best memories from coming through at Norwich then?
Oh God, lots from obviously from the early part of just being involved with a football club at 14 years old, and just that feeling of that's all that you wanted to do. Feeling really excited to be coached by ex-professionals and getting a level of training and insight into what it means to be a footballer at an early age sort of certainly helped. And I think because I was quite a tall teenager, I would get utilised in the team a year above as well. And I think sort of exposure to that higher age group and it just being a little bit more physically demanding than my own age group helped with progression as well. Had a tournament over in Northern Ireland, the Milk Cup, which I loved going over. It was just professional teams from all over the UK, and then they'd send over some teams from around the world as well. Was just I don't know if you can remember the Canary Cup from around here back in the day, but it was like that, only 10 times bigger.
Wow.
They had, I remember Alex Ferguson turning up to open the ceremony. So, it was a big thing over there.
Yeah.
They kicked off with an opening game, and I remember them talking about Eusebio being in the crowd. So it was a really, really big thing over in Ireland, and they still do it over there now. But some great experiences of that, obviously making my debut, scoring my first goal away at Man City. Victories over Ipswich. There were a few, so they were always, good ones to remember. I started in the infamous 5-0 defeat at Portman Road. We won't talk about that, but that obviously stuck as well for all the wrong reasons. But yeah, there's so many that, if I had enough time to sort of think over each passing year, I could probably come up with loads and loads of, good memories and stories and stuff. But obviously debut, the sort of camaraderie around being involved in a team, competitive team, winning games, being successful, scoring, used to love scoring goals. Really, really, really positive memories, and some difficult ones as well.
Sure.
Of course.
I mean, it's obviously it's like you talk about the go back to talking about the UEA. I mean, things at Colney have changed considerably in that time. Have you been to the training facility at Colney since it's been sort of modernised over the last few years?
No, I haven't. No, but what I have seen, I mean, I follow some of the players, and O'Neill is great for his Instagram and his stories and his uploads and stuff like that. So, you get to see him walking around with a phone, and I barely recognise the place, if I'm honest. I can see where things are compared to where they were when I was there. So the dressing rooms, look like they're in the same place, but they just look completely different. The dining hall, the little kitchen and stuff like that, and the pitches as well. It just looks like it's really been brought on and developed, and has got real high-end equipment and training facilities as well. So I feel gutted that I haven't been in to have a look, or even was able to use some of them when I was a player, because it just looks phenomenal now.
Yeah, real testament to the hard work that everyone's put in over the years, I think.
Yeah, for sure. We used to have, and I remember it well as a YTS, because we'd have a rota about it. Like, we would literally go out and set up the pitches prior to the first team training. So we would be dragging goals from one side of Colney to the other and setting it out, putting cones out everywhere. And after training had finished, going in and picking everything up and collecting it. And they weren't these goals on wheels or anything like that. These are ones that you had to carry. So yeah, I can imagine it's not like that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think
I don't even know if they clean boots anymore. Like, we would clean 3 or 4 pairs of boots before and after each training session as well.
Well, I think they've got a vegetable patch at Colney now, and I think that they sort of try and encourage these sort of younger players to kind of look after vegetables and grow their own, and I think they do, from what I've read. I mean, I don't know if it's true. They still kind of encourage them to sort of take the ball bags out and all that kind of thing. So I'd like to think that there's still an element of DIY ethos to it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was, but it was character building. Like,
exactly.
you would, when you were doing it, although it didn't seem fun, you felt really lucky to be in a position where you were able to do it, because all of my mates would have given up anything to be where I was, even though I was lugging balls and goals around prior to training. And then when you make that step from YTS into pro contract, that sort of fulfillment of being on the other side of it now, it wasn't that we'd expect the young YTS lads to do this, but it was just I don't know, just that feeling of feeling an important part of the Norwich City picture. We were always well looked after, boots packed, training arrangements, travel arrangements, everything put in place. Like, we just had to turn up.
No, it's excellent. I think the question I was going to ask as well is, during that time of being in the YTS, did you ever, or should I say, were you allotted a senior player to look after as such, or can you remember any of the senior players that perhaps gave you any kind of help or advice or support along the way?
Yeah, I felt really, I say blessed. I probably didn't appreciate it as much at the time, but looking back on it now, like, there was an abundance of support and experience on offer. Like, so my first professional I cleaned boots for was Spencer Pryor. And obviously he was a centre half, I was a centre forward, so we didn't have that. He had an understanding of what it was to be a defender, but I wanted, somebody to support me with being a striker. And I remember Ewan Roberts joining. I weren't ever his boot boy or anything like that, but as a young pro looking up into the squad, like, I really sort of tried to seek him out a little bit, and he found his first sort of, I think it was probably 8 months or so, quite tough, come in for a bit of unfair stick from the fans, and then it clicked for him, and obviously went on to be the striker that everyone knew he could be. He was really supportive and really helpful. But I don't know, there's something about sort of growing older and a bit wiser that makes you look back now and think, actually, I wasn't really interested in that support, or if I was, I didn't really listen, because at 18, 19, 20, and you've just been thrust into a first team, like, part of your immaturity, if you like, is that belief that I know it all now. I've cracked this. And so, it's not that you're not wanting support or help, but you just don't take it on board as much as if somebody was to come up to me now and offered me some advice, and it was good advice, then I would take it. Because I think, looking back at my experiences of not taking the advice, has ultimately led to a much shortened career than perhaps my potential suggested I could have had. But there are other factors and other choices that went into that. But again, it was just that wanting to do it myself and to do it my own way. And the squad that Norwich had when I was a first year pro was a very divided squad. And I don't mean divided in terms of opinions, but in terms of the age bracket. So, about 14 of us, our 16 YTS lads, all got offered a professional contract. So we had 14 lads that were all 18 or under. Very few pros between the age of sort of 20 and 28, and then lots of pros that were sort of 28 and over. You talk about Brian Gunn, Robert Fleck, Rob Newman, Spencer Pryor, Matt Jackson came along, Craig Fleming, Malcolm Kai, all really old pros. Neil Adams, another one, Mike Milligan. So all had been there and done it in terms of experience and stuff like that. Peter Grant obviously went on to be manager. he was always willing to help out with advice and support for the young lads. He'd get on your case, and he'd be really hard. And some days you'd think, God, he really doesn't like me. And I remember him. I remember not confronting him, but just pulling him after training and said, like, God, it feels like you're being really hard on me at the moment. Are we all right? Kind of thing. And he said to me, the moment I stop criticising, or the moment I stop wanting more from you, that would be when I would worry, because it means that I've give up on you, and I don't think there's any hope for you. So while I'm offering you this and I'm offering that, it's because I still think you've got a chance. And that stuck with me a little bit. That idea that actually, yes, he was being a bit of pain and digging me out, but because he had the time to do that, because he felt that it would potentially lead somewhere for me. But I just didn't take any of what was on offer all that seriously.
Yeah, I mean, tough love is sometimes difficult to kind of sort of absorb, as it were. You can be a bit like, well, what am I doing wrong? Like you said, what have I got to prove myself? I mean, I guess, like, hypothetically, if you know, if it had been sort of advice administered in a different kind of way, would you have taken it on board, do you think? More of a shoulder around the arm kind of approach?
No, because I think I think there were players there that were good at doing that as well. And I just think that, not consciously, subconsciously, I just resisted any form of sort of help or support. And it was probably an ego thing, I just wasn't able to look at it through the lenses that I can look at it through now. I saw the players as teammates, as, we're all part of the same project, if you like. What I didn't see was this abundance of experience. I just weren't able to see it for what it was. And so rather than being able in the moment to sit there and think, gosh, I've got Peter Grant who's played X amount of 100 appearances, played at Celtic, done this, done that, giving me advice on football, I should really listen. It was just, thanks, cheers. I know. So it was just, I don't know. It was just, I didn't have the ability to sort of take all of that on board.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things in life, isn't it? I mean, I certainly can draw comparisons to that in my own career, AD, and people back in the day when I'd made it as a general manager of a leisure facility, and I thought, I made it here, and I was thinking, well, why is my area manager still doing this, and it probably isn't until now that I realised the reasons why he was doing that. Right? It's sometimes that people see themselves. People see when they help me out, Morgan. I think when people give advice, I think they see themselves 20 years previous almost.
And what advice would I wanted when I was that age?
Correct. And I think that's the thing. It's and fair play for what you're doing now, both professionally in the at the SEN school that you work at, but also I gather you're involved in the game as well. You run a local team in the area, right?
I stopped running it. I've recommitted over the last 18 months to playing again. So I'm playing for a couple of local teams in the area at 46, which has been great, because over the last couple of years I've been on a bit of a, I don't know, it just feels like some of the years, and obviously we'll perhaps talk about that later on in the chat, but I feel like between the ages of sort of late 20s and mid 30s, I lost quite a few years through lifestyle choices and such. And so opportunities to sort of carry on playing football, even locally, not looking after myself in terms of sort of fitness and nutrition. But I've got back into that over the last couple of years and probably got myself into a shape where I feel now probably in better condition than I was in my early 30s. And so I'm just going to push that as far as I can and just get some enjoyment out of football whilst my joints are still able to. So playing locally for Philby on a Saturday, and then I play veterans football for Yarmouth Town and Hemsby on a Sunday.
Oh, wow. So
it keeps me busy.
No, it's good. It's really good. It's good to hear. I mean, I think, for some of our other listeners, I'm 40 and I try to do as much stretching and sort of, yoga stretching is what I can try to do as much as possible, really, because you want to keep mobile, right, as you sort of get older, and it just makes things easier. It just makes things easier if you want to commit to like jogging or the gym, or like yourself, AD, playing football all weekend. You know, you don't end up like rolling, putting your arm out or something, and it takes ages to get back together again.
Yeah. Chasing 20-year-olds around a pitch isn't fun anymore. It isn't. So you have to be a bit smarter with it. But I still enjoy it, and all the teams I'm at, we've got a great bunch of lads, and it isn't just the football; it's just that camaraderie again, isn't it? And that sort of being involved and part of something, but not just being a part of it, being able to kind of effectively contribute towards it as well, because it just gives you a sense of purpose and a bit of a use within that group of people. And they're all terrific. You know, Phil will be on a Saturday, probably the most competitive team I play for, because it's just adults football on a Saturday in the North East Norfolk League. So, you know, our squad is made up of lots of young lads as well. So being able to kind of give them a little bit of support, but just a little bit of freedom to go out and explore the sort of players that they want to be, and you know, making them feel like it's okay to get things wrong and make a mistake and stuff like that. But also, you know, that competitiveness that still lies within me, that, you know, the bits that the head still wants to do that the body can't. But I still enjoy it. We're sat third in the league, and I'm sat third in the goal scoring charts. So
you're obviously doing something right then, Eddie.
Yeah, it's great. I really, really do enjoy it.
Good.
Should I ask the next question?
Yeah,
by all means. Yes.
So, how did it feel? You mentioned making your debut for Norwich and how great that was. So, I mean, if you could expound on that a little bit, how did it feel to make your senior debut for Norwich? And what sort of parts of that do you remember what the most cherished memories of that?
Yeah, I can remember it. I can remember all the bits in the build up to it, being in the squad of 16 for the first time. That goes up in the change rooms at Colney a couple of days before. Seeing my name on there, obviously aware. So back then you would have a squad of 16. You start an 11, 3 subs, and then 2 people just wouldn't get changed. And I wasn't sure at the time. I didn't know too much about it at the time, but apparently Ewan Roberts was carrying a bit of an injury with his big toe.
Right.
And so whilst I was delighted to be in the squad of 16, in my head I'm thinking, because it's my first time, probably going to be one of the ones that's going to be left out.
Yeah.
But I think because Ewan was carrying the knock, I made it onto the bench. I remember meeting Mum and Dad in Norwich City Centre on Friday afternoon after training, marching into Topshop, picking myself out a really nice suit to turn up for match day in. So brand new suit, like all bits, waistcoat and everything, nice tie. Although I look at the pictures now, and obviously it was fine for back then, but I wouldn't wear it now.
The Topshop that was on Gentleman's Walk.
Yeah, that's the one.
I can remember that.
Yeah,
that's great.
So straight into there for a suit. Turned up on match day, found out I was going to be one of the subs, so I was obviously delighted about that. I just remember getting my kit on and just wanting to get out on the pitch to do the warm up.
Yeah.
And you know, out there doing the warm up for about 40 minutes, and you just feel the place filling up slowly within those 40 minutes. Yeah. And you think, good about, you know, under what set of circumstances would I come on? You know, maybe if we're losing 1-0, or we need to try and push for a goal or something, you know, maybe I'll come under those circumstances, but I don't want us to be losing. So you sort of talk yourself out of that a little bit. And so, yeah, just in awe of everything, taking it all in, just trying to copy what all of the older pros were doing, full of support, full of help in terms of preparation and stuff. Sat on the bench, wanting to warm up every 3 or 4 minutes, just to sort of keep busy. I just couldn't sit still. We were at home to Port Vale. It was 0-0, half time come in. Ewan's big toe was really struggling with it, so he was coming off, I was coming on. So straight out for the second half.
Wow.
And it was, I was like, oh God, I couldn't believe it. And you just get, adrenaline takes over. You just run and run and run and run. And everything you've learned in terms of being a striker and discipline and stuff goes out the window for the first 10 minutes. You're like a headless chicken. You're just trying to chase everything, which has its uses. But obviously, in terms of sticking to a game plan and being in position, wasn't ideal. And then I remember a ball being played over the left-hand side, Robert Fleck running onto it on the left-hand side, the centre-back having to go across to close him down, leaving me unmarked in the penalty box. He was coming up at an angle to the 18-yard box. I was screaming for him to square it. He had to roll it across and I had a tap in. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to get a chance to score here. I'm going to get a chance to score here. On his left foot, Flecky's right-footed. And he sticks his head down and he pings one with his left foot across the goalkeeper, hits the inside of the bottom of the post and goes in, so that we're 1-0 up and we won the game 1-0. And I was absolutely delighted that we'd scored, that he'd scored, because he was obviously an idol of mine growing up, following Norwich on the terraces. He was a big striker. But just feeling a little bit gutted. Oh, if only, could have rolled that across and I could have got my first goal or stuff like that. But it was just, he was a great finisher, and that was a great finish on the day. And so we won the game 1-0. And I remember being on, I think, about £35 a week. But the contracts that we were on saying you'd get, I think it was £250 appearance money.
Right.
I'm thinking like, oh my God, that's like a whole month's worth of wages on top of my wages. And then I think they run like £100 or £150 a point as well. So we just got 3 of them. So I got the appearance money and the win bonus, and just thinking, oh my God, like this is going to be crazy. And then managed to stay in the team. I think went on a little bit of a run in the team, and just couldn't quite find the goal scoring form that I'd had with the reserves. I did manage to score at Man City, was about 3 or 4 games in. But again, Craig Bellamy done all the work, and this time he did lay it across for me and I did tap into an empty net. But that's sort of kind of where it all started, and that was probably my most that's probably the season where I played or contributed towards the most minutes in terms of playing. And just a phenomenal feeling, returning home to the family and friends, and them all not just following Norwich but following your journey, and just feeling like really like proud and accomplished, and was just was something else.
I mean, it's the what you said there was the bit that really sort of struck me, is like, I couldn't imagine standing in a stadium that size, because I mean, when you're sat down and you're sort of looking around, watching the game and stuff, you don't really think about it. But I imagine going out there, being on the pitch or pitch side and watching the stadium fill up. It must have been electric. I mean, the only thing I can compare it to, and it's very loose, is like playing in a band where you're sort of waiting on stage for the venue to fill up, and you just, you get more and more adrenaline and more excited and more like, Christ, this is, we're going to have to play soon. I mean, we're talking 100 person venue. You're talking a 27,000 seat stadium, whatever. It must have been an absolutely incredible experience.
Yeah. And it was, but you would hear, the noise build up, as the stadium filled. But as soon as you're out on the pitch and you were playing the game, it's very rare that you would consciously catch yourself. Like if you did something really well, either yourself or the team, and it brought a big roar from the crowd and a big cheer, like you would feed off of that, you would hear that. But generally speaking, you would just learn to shut all the noise out, because for every sort of cheer and excitement shown from the crowd for a near miss or a positive break or something like that, there was always 5 or 6 moans to go with a misplaced pass or a bad choice or something from one of the other players. So you had to try and shut that out, because you just get I don't know, it would get in your head too much.
I think it was quite what's the word I'm looking for? A good example of that, AD, was last season when David Wagner came out and not criticised the Norwich fans, but probably gave them a stern word. I think was probably be the best way of saying it. The players can hear you. You know, I've made a substitution here which has actually worked, by the way. And at the time, the fans were moaning. So I think, you know, I don't know if you remember those comments from Wagner, but I think is that a fair assessment? Would you say with a manager? And obviously, I'm going to ask you who your manager was at the time of your debut later. But would that manager have come out and sort of said that to the players, perhaps in a team talk?
Yeah, I mean, I had various managers that would sort of manage the players completely differently. Mike Walker was my first manager. I thought he was brilliant. I thought
What a
the way
legend.
he managed the young players, but also the squad, his media responsibilities, managed expectations of the fans, and you know, had for what I felt like a really positive relationship with the supporters. I know obviously he left and went to Everton, but even with everything that kind of he'd managed to achieve with getting into Europe and all of that. Yeah, I think sometimes you've got to be careful as a manager, because it's all right coming out and criticising the fans when something has gone right. But if your one thing that's gone right is on the back of 9 things that have gone wrong,
Correct, yeah.
they've got you every time, you know, and there's nobody likes that person that gets it wrong 9 times and then gets it right once and wants to rub it in everyone's face. Like, nobody likes that person. No one wants to be that person. And so I think, you know, that is then maybe an opportunity for him to come out and gel with the fans and say, look, I know we've got a few things wrong in the past week, but hopefully now we've tried this and this worked this time. You know, stick with us because we are trying things. You know, I hope you can see. And it just feels a bit more together than coming out and slating them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fair shout. Yeah, 100%. So Mike Walker was your so that was going to be my question then, as Mike Walker was the manager when you made your debut, and that would have been his, correct me if I'm wrong, but his second coming. So
Yeah.
as you said, he went away to Everton, and then
Come back soon after and got battered 3-0. I can remember that as well.
Yeah, and then he came back, and
Yeah.
were some of the players you could mention that were part of the team that not necessarily that day, but in and around that time. I think you've mentioned some of them already, to be fair.
Yeah, I'd say Brian Gunn, Andy Marshall were your goalies. We had Rob Newman, we had Spencer Pryor, we had Keith Scott, Daryl Such, Darren Eady, Keith O'Neill were coming through, Mike Milligan, Neil Adams, Sean Carey was just coming through, Danny Mills, Jamie Curran, Andy Johnson, Adi Akinbaye, and then us. They were also Danny Mills, Edie O'Neill. They were a couple of 3 years above us. And then in my sort of era, if you like, was myself. You had obviously Drew Broughton, who spoke to you recently, Forbesy, Darren Kenton, Bellamy, Llewellyn, Darryl Russell, Shay Wilson. Apologies if I've missed anyone out, but you know, people that came in and went on to make quite a few appearances for Norwich before either being sold on or moving on. So, you know, there was a lot of investment and a lot of respect throughout the country around the youth setup that Norwich had in place at the time. You know, we were a successful youth. You know, we ran our youth successfully. Like, you know, I remember the team that went to the Northern Ireland Milk Cup 2 times prior to us winning it both times. You know, the success we'd had in the FA Youth Cup, I'm not sure if we ever won it. We may have won it once, but we would certainly get far. I remember us getting knocked out to Blackburn Rovers in the quarters or the semis of the FA Youth Cup. You know, and, you know, when I think about it and I name some of the players that are a similar age to us, and, you know, being at West Ham, you know, the likes of Lampard, Ferdinand, them sort of players of being that age, you know, we beat West Ham, Arsenal, Tottenham to the youth league in our first season, won it quite convincingly. So we had a real solid youth team that the majority of them all went on to have quite successful careers.
That's fantastic. I think the work that Sammy Morgan did it within that academy can't go unnoticed, I suppose, or, you know, we can't go without mentioning that. And, you know, I think he perhaps you can just talk about the work that he did there and some.
He was brilliant, a hero of mine. I've known Sammy since I was about 11. because he was a school teacher in the area that I grew up. But I just remember him always being there to support. As I got a bit older and I played more regularly for Norwich's Centre of Excellence team, and he was my manager. We had the big number 9 in common. We had the Northern Ireland connections as well, and so he was a real support for me. But obviously around Colney you had Steve Foley, who looked after the reserve team. He was brilliant. I think Colin Watts, who's still around or was around recently at Colney in terms of working with the youth team. Keith Webb obviously was fantastic in terms of the 2 years we spent as YTS, the training day in, day out and stuff like that. The amount of stuff that we learned and that we picked up and enabled us to kind of manage ourselves at pro level was phenomenal. Dave Stringer, another one. He was supporting Keith Webb. All phenomenal people, all highly experienced in what they did, and all only interested in helping and developing the young players with what they knew. And then ultimately it was up to us whether we took it on board or not.
Yeah.
No, amazing. I think, you know, I used to go to, as a child, I used to go to soccer schools, and these types of people would appear just out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And they were, I wonder whether they were there to just see if there was any sort of, you know, talented footballers that they hadn't seen elsewhere, but unfortunately I wasn't one of them.
I can't not mention Gordon Bennett as well. I don't know if you know Gordon. Obviously, the fans became familiar with him when he stepped into a sort of chief executive role. But prior to that, he was youth development officer, and he wasn't on the training pitch. You know, he wasn't out there in tracksuits and stuff like that. He was forever in a suit and an anorak. But he made everything tick behind the scenes. He was one of the most unique characters you were ever likely to meet, with this sort of deep Bristol accent. And the amount of miles and hours and time that he committed and invested in all of us as a youth team project was phenomenal. He really was a character. He'd drive the minibus, he would pick us up from train stations, he would take us for food, he would sort out digs or accommodation the night before. Like, he was something else, and a real character as well. If you didn't know him, I don't know whether you would know how to work him out or not, but just spending time with him and being around him, I got to know his quirks. And you speak to anybody that was a part of that era and generation when he was involved, that they'll have some stories about him for sure. He was brilliant. But completely nuts.
we love that on here.
And Drew mentioned him as well, quite.
He did, yeah.
Echo thoughts. So moving on to the next question, and so you've already talked about some of your sort of most memorable moments at Norwich, but what I wanted to talk about was perhaps some of your more memorable moments later on in your career, and also your international career as well, and how that come about.
Yeah. So international career. Mum was born in Northern Ireland, so all of her side of the family Northern Irish, Northern Ireland connections. I think some of them still living out there now, but a lot of them sort of more elderly. And unbeknown to me, I remember sort of knowing about it as a 13 or a 14-year-old. I remember Mum saying, one of my great cousins or your great uncle or something like that is manager of a football team. He manages Wigan. And I remember writing him a letter as a 14-year-old. I can't remember if I got a letter back. I think I did. I just can't remember what it said. But that was Brian Hamilton.
Oh, right. Okay.
He's like a distant relative. And then obviously he joined Norwich with Bruce Rioch as his assistant. But he also spent some time as head coach of Northern Ireland men's team.
Wow.
And I remember him putting me on the standby squad for a Northern Ireland match. Before I'd even made my Norwich debut, I remember getting the letter saying I was on the standby squad for a match against Portugal as a 17-year-old. And I thought that was phenomenal. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. Never got called up to it. But still, I just had that kind of experience of the letter and being sort of thought of in that way. And then obviously played a bit more regular for Norwich, and then got drafted into the Northern Ireland under-21s and then into the senior squad.
Amazing.
and they were something else as well. Like we were quite successful under 21 squad. We'd won more games than we lost for sure. We beat France, we beat Germany. So we had some decent players, but we'd turn up for a game on a Saturday. We'd meet up on the Monday or Tuesday for 3 or 4 days preparation from the game. And then, no kidding, after the game and the Saturday night afterwards, you'd need about 6 days downtime just to recover. Because you imagine a group of Northern Ireland lads all together in one hotel in the middle of Belfast. It was. Yeah, it was. But then there was always sort of a drinking culture around football around about that time, and it was only the sort of 2 or 3 years after I turned pro that people started coming in and addressing it and changing it slightly.
Yeah.
And other players changed with the changes, and I stuck with what I knew, which probably wasn't my best and wisest choice. But that's what it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, some great memories for playing for Northern Ireland. Managed to score a few goals for the under-21s, but never for the full side. I remember rocking up to Turkey for a Euro qualifier. Under-21s played on the Friday. The senior side played on the Saturday. So I was with the 21s. We got prepped for our game on the Friday. We had some supporters turn up. There was about 6 of them, and they hired a minibus. And I remember driving to the game and the minibus pulling alongside us because it had the Northern Ireland flag sticking out the back. And then we get to one of them big Turkish stadiums where you walk up the stairs and you come out through the ground. And then looking around, and 3/4 of it being absolutely full, firecrackers, fireworks, smoke. And then 6 guys stood behind one of the goals, completely surrounded by emptiness and just themselves, Northern Ireland. But yeah, we got beat 4-0. We then watched the first team get beat 4-0 on the Saturday as well. But that was a real hostile environment. That wasn't an enjoyable experience.
Yeah, I can imagine that was a bit of a toe curler, that one. You talked about the game against France at under 21 level. I mean, there must have been some players in that.
Yeah.
Given that they went to go and play, they won the World Cup about 4 or 5 years later, so there must have been.
Yeah, there was. Gallas was centre back. Sylvester was playing because Gerard Houllier was in the crowd. He'd come to watch him, and I think shortly after that he signed for Man United. Trezeguet.
What a player.
Malouda. So I've got the team sheet somewhere, but you look through it now, and Domenech was the coach. We beat them 3-1. We did. David Healy played. He had some time at Norwich.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, he's a good striker.
He scored a couple. I got one of the goals, and he got the other 2. But Paul McVeigh, Phil Mulrine, they both played.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant.
Do you still speak to these guys today, or is it?
No, I follow Paul McVeigh, and obviously everything that he's doing within motivation and stuff, mentality, psychology and stuff. I follow him, but no, not any real contact.
Fair enough.
No.
Sorry, I mean, Jez did also talk about like other sort of parts of your time in. I mean, I'm going to be biased because I want to ask you about your time at Dereham Town. Shout out to Dereham on this podcast. But if you could tell us a little bit more about your time playing for Dereham Town, the Magpies, and what that experience was like, and how did it compare to your time in the pro game?
Yeah, it was my first experience of Dereham Town was I don't know whether they do it so much anymore, but it almost felt like it was on a bit of a cycle. Pre-season games with Norwich.
Yeah, they used to. Used to between either Kingsland or Dereham. They
Kingsland, Dereham, Galston, Wroxham. They would always throw one of them games in somewhere at the start of the season. So I remember turning up to Dereham for Norwich in a pre-season game, and it was one team went out the first half and then another team went out the second half.
Right,
and then from Norwich I left and went to Colchester, a couple of seasons there. It just didn't work out. Found it quite difficult towards the end, and got me to a position where I was contemplating like walking out on football completely. And I remember having a conversation with Phil Parkinson. He was the manager at Colchester at the time, and said, look, I'm just not enjoying it. I'm ready to walk away.
Yeah.
I just want to go and play football somewhere where I can enjoy it again.
Yeah,
and so he agreed to that. I joined Wivenhoe because they were quite local and played for them for a season.
Yeah.
But obviously, because we moved everything down to Colchester for football in Colchester, in the background, we were looking to move back to Norfolk. And so that was all happening. And once we did move back to Norfolk, wanted to leave Wivenhoe and join Dereham. I'd spoke to Rob Taylor. He'd been in touch. He was manager at the time, and Barnsley had met up with me. But Wivenhoe were holding on to my registration. They wanted Dereham to pay £5,000.
right.
Which I was a bit annoyed about because, I wasn't going to be playing for Wivenhoe, not because I didn't want it, but just because it wasn't viable. I was moving back to an area, and they were being quite stubborn about it. So I had to get some legal advice and read some letters to Wivenhoe, and in the end, they did manage to transfer me over to Wroxham at no cost. Not Wroxham, sorry, Dereham at no cost. So yeah, turned up training, spent. God, I can't remember how long it was now. It felt like at least a season, maybe more. And that we were quite successful because my wife's family have got connections to Matshaw, which is close to Dereham. There was a lot of familiar faces and stuff. So I really, really enjoyed it. I thought there were some great guys behind the scenes and also players that I played with at the time. Yeah, and it's a time that I do remember fondly because it was about getting back to playing football and enjoying it again.
Yeah.
And that's what that allowed me to do.
Yeah,
I think.
mean, it's something that we talked about with Drew on a previous podcast about just enjoying the game more and having fun with it. Rediscovering that sort of joy, which I think, if that's what if that's what you're sort of saying, like with your time in the pro game, you'd sort of maybe hit a point where you weren't enjoying it anymore, so you needed to rediscover the fun, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I don't know. I think you need to have kind of a certain mentality and a certain sort of psychology to be successful at pro level. And whilst I feel like I've developed that mentality and I have it now, obviously it's 26 years too late. I just didn't have it at the time. And whether that was lack of experience or whether that was just a reluctance to kind of accept help or support around me, but obviously still enjoyed playing and training. But just, if I had a redo, it would be, little things like going out to training 20 minutes earlier, hanging about the training ground for an hour afterwards, whether it be an extra gym session or but just those, extra little bits that the sort of top players seem to have and come quite easily. I was quite content turning up for training when I needed to be there and then leaving as soon as it had finished.
Right.
And, thinking that would be enough because I'm doing what's asked, but never really thinking or considering or even being willing to put in more. And I think if I was able to, that's definitely one of the things that I would do, is look at ways to just completely improve everything about you, whether it be weaker foot, strength, fitness, speed, just work on something extra in addition to training with the support of the older players and the coaches to just improve yourself, because then obviously it gives you more opportunities when it comes to keeping your place in the team and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny, but since doing these podcasts, we have these conversations with, former pros or people involved in the club. But I always think to myself, I was like, what you're just saying there kind of applies to everyday life, right? With with a career or with a job. If you want to kind of be successful, as it were, whatever that means to you have to put in the effort, right? It can be in relationships or it could be friendships or whatever. Just putting that extra effort in just gets more out, I guess.
Yeah, and it is that. I mean, I can't remember what the game was I was watching, and we were talking on the sidelines and just saying, me and the coach in agreement, like if that guy would have just ran 10 yards there, he wouldn't have had to then run them extra 50 yards afterwards if he'd have done that 10 yards in the first place. So it's almost about trying to make things easier for yourself in the longer run by putting in the effort now.
Yeah.
And that was just the one way I couldn't see it or look at it. Like, if I did an extra hour training 3 or 4 days a week and put that in, that might feel like work now, but 6 months down the line, it's going to make things a bit easier for myself in terms of what I'm able to achieve on the pitch, my ability to be competitive with other people, because that's where they would have had me at an advantage, because I guarantee most of the players that I come up against were putting those extra hours in, so they were already that amount of work ahead of me already. But again, I just did not have the sort of thinking mechanics to see it or to visualize it like that. Whereas looking back on it now, it just seems so obvious.
Yeah.
No, definitely. I think if we just move on to the next question, which I'm gonna change slightly if you don't mind, because I noticed when I was doing some research that you went to go and play in Holland on a loan spell. I just wondered if you could just talk about that experience a little bit. Obviously, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but perhaps maybe that was your first time you moved away from Norfolk, and how did you find that, I suppose, and what was the experience like?
Yeah, so I remember it was Brian Hamilton that sent me over there. He was manager at the time. He said that he'd been speaking to them. They just had a quite successful striker transfer to another Dutch club for €5 million or whatever it was, which is quite big money for them. So obviously he was good, but they were looking to replace him. And I thought, gosh, what with me? I barely played for the first team, but they wanted me to go over there on a month's loan. So I did, went over there. There was a Australian guy in goal that knew Ewan Roberts. So there was already sort of somebody that I could, talk to and speak to. Turned up for training, met the team. Great bunch of lads. Not a single bit of body hair between any of them. Armpits, legs, chest, a lot, all gone, none of it. And they were welcoming. Training was really good. We'd do training 3 times a day. We'd get together early about 8 o'clock and we'd have half an hour in the gym. Then we'd go out and do some on the pitch training, and then afterwards we would either do some more on the pitch training or some fitness work. So that was all like well structured. I really enjoyed that. We had a friendly arranged for about 5 or 6 days in. Played I want to say Genk from Belgium.
Mm-hmm.
So they came over one of our training pitches, but like the American training pitches where it's got like a stadium already built around it, but just a small one. Okay. So we went over there and played. I remember scoring within about 15 minutes. So that sort of relaxed me a bit. We were 4-0 up at half time, 4-1 about 10 minutes into the second half. And on about 60 minutes, I remember running for a ball and running square in the face of one of their players. And I just remember feeling my nose go sideways. So yeah, completely busted. Sent me for checks and stuff. Put one of those big plaster straps across my nose and under my eyes.
Yeah.
And then they sent me back to Norwich. So I was about a week into my month loan, broke my nose and had to come back. Yeah, that was obviously a disappointment, but yeah, they were positive with their feedback. Not what we're looking for now, but we can see in a couple of years you could be a really good player. Yeah. And again, more telltale signs around potential being there, but you just need to maximise it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a different experience. Really enjoyed it, but obviously not the breaking my nose bit.
Yeah, that made me crawl inside myself a little bit there. It has to be said.
Yeah.
So I think just moving on to we've touched on a few things, and I really enjoyed the sort of the retrospective view on what you could have done better. But I think now you work in a special needs school, what led you to pursue that career, and do you bring any kind of lessons from those footballing days into what you do now?
Yeah, Tuesday, I think probably this path that I'm now on has probably come about some of the sort of failings in football and the bits that sort of went with that. So one thing that I don't ever shy away from talking about, but is not something that kind of rarely comes up. I don't know whether it's other people not wanting to talk about it, but I've always been quite open about the fact that I'm an alcoholic. Right. And so that journey in itself of, going through years and years of sort of torture to myself in terms of drinking to oblivion and all stuff like that, to get into a place where I knew it needed to stop, and then rebuilding things. I think that's helped me kind of develop a really different mindset, not just on me, but on like my life and what I want from it and what I can offer and how I can kind of really improve myself just to be a good, decent version of me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, a lot of the early kind of, certainly the first few years in recovery, a lot of the help that I got, a lot of the things that I found most useful in terms of my own sobriety was helping other people. I think, once you find a purpose or you find something that contributes towards other people and you get that feeling or that sense of having a worth, you start to kind of appreciate yourself a bit more than when you let yourself, drink yourself to sleep. Like, there was no love for myself while I was allowing myself to do that. I just didn't realise at the time. But as I started to get well and I started to get better, I noticed a pattern in helping other people, and the impact of my own well-being and feelings about myself. So it started off with coaching a football team locally, an under 13s or an under 12s team. A group of players never been together before, turned up for a training session for a new team, because there was about 30 boys that had turned up, and some of them were of one age and some were the other. We decided that we'd split them into two teams, and I took one of them on. And that whole, like, 3 or 4 seasons of working with them boys, and we didn't win any league trophies, but we won the Respect Award 3 years running.
Nice.
Was some journey. And as much as some of the boys will say that, it helped with their development as kids to adults, and their footballing ability, it really helped me as well. It gave me a real sort of purpose, in a sense that I wanted to do more of this. So I applied with an agency around what it would take for me to be able to work in the school. And they sent me to a place in Lingwood, a campus school in Lingwood, just for one day, just to support an absence. And I just remember going there and falling in love with the whole environment and the work they were trying to do. They told me about it being a school for children that have been excluded from normal schools. I expected it to be a bit chaotic, children running around, teachers running around, that's just how I thought it would be. But when I got in there was such a calm, loving, caring environment that I thought, this is the sort of impact that I want to have. And so I was invited back, applied for a full-time job, and that was 8 years ago now.
Oh, wow.
And so I've just sort of followed that through from teaching assistant to, I'm now an assistant-based lead, so oversee the primary section of the school. But again, just that idea of being in a position to kind of offer help and support, and some of it based on experience, being able to say to somebody, God, I know what that feels like, and really know what it feels like, can be quite useful. So yeah, it's enabled me to build on what was a real negative part of my life and turn it around into like a huge positive.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's a bit surreal at times. It's almost like a rebirth, but just that idea that I don't think I would be where I am now without having to have gone through all of that first.
Yeah. And look, thanks first and foremost for sharing that story with us. And I think you're an absolute credit to. You don't need me to tell you this, Adi, but you're an absolute credit to your family. You're an absolute credit to yourself for going on that journey and actually coming out the other end with a positive story. And I think a lot of people don't. And I think what you've achieved there is phenomenal. And, thank you for everything you do, for not only what you've done for our football club, but also what you've gone on to do with these youngsters, and not only in football, but also, within the SEN school as well. So no, just a massive thank you from my part.
Yeah, no worries. And thanks to you guys for obviously giving me an opportunity to sort of talk about these things, because I think, if there's people out there that are struggling, sometimes just hearing a voice say that, there is a way out can be quite useful for that person. So I've never hidden behind it and have been quite open about it, because, there are people like I did for about 10 or 15 years just suffer in silence.
Yeah.
And it was only in reaching out that they told me I'd find a life beyond my wildest dreams, and that's exactly what I found.
That's amazing. That's a really good story. Thank you for sharing that again.
No problem.
I know we have sort of talked about, you have sort of talked or briefly touched on advice for younger players. I guess if you could again expound on that a little bit, what sort of advice would you give to young footballers trying to balancing sport and I guess education as well?
Yeah, I think it's always worth having, even if it's, you know, somewhere in the back of your mind, or a conversation with people around you, family or whatever, a plan B, you know, because you're one innocuous challenge or bad tackle or unfortunate moment away from everything being taken away from you. So I always think it's worth considering, you know, not dwelling on too much, you know, what would I do if I couldn't do football? So at least you've got a plan in place if something was to happen. And then that aside, you know, once you're in it, yeah, and you've, you know, you've gone on to achieve the things you wanted to do. So, you know, getting into the academy, getting pro contract, you know, I think again, subconsciously for me, it was like the end of the journey. I've made it. I'm here now. Whereas actually it's the start of the journey. You know, you need to get yourself in the team now. Once you're in the team, you need to stay in the team. And then we need to talk about longevity and lasting seasons and stuff, and what the other players doing that you're not doing. I wouldn't inundate him with information, like I wouldn't overload him. I would make sure that I had positive, like-minded people around me, you know, that my support around me was strong, and with my interests at heart. I would utilise and recognise, you know, just because you've got 3 or 4 older pros, or even if it's a pro that's the same age as you that's played 30 games more than you, I would still view that as a player with experience. And that when somebody shares helpful information with you, it doesn't need to be taken as a criticism. They're not judging you or digging you out or everything. They're just trying to offer you something that maybe they weren't offered when they were your position. So, you know, take the bits that you find helpful and useful on board, and then just go out and like train each training session and play each game like you might not get an opportunity to play again. You know, I know it's really cliche, and you know, one of the football sayings that I must have heard a million times growing up. You know, the easy bit is getting the shirt, the hard bit is keeping hold of it. Yeah. You know, so once you've got yourself into that position, you've got in that team, that's when the real work starts. And so, yeah, I wouldn't settle for making it. I would then use that as a platform to go on and smash through whatever you can. Like, yeah. But the positive people around you, people that are a good influence, like-minded people. Phil Mulrine springs to mind from our Northern Ireland trips. You know, he was the only one that stood out. You know, and this wasn't all Northern Ireland trips, but certainly the majority of them. I can remember after a game, the lads going out and being straight on the beers, and, you know, we wouldn't be seen for about 2.5 days. And we'd rock up at the airport in separate taxis with our bags and everything that we needed ready to get the plane just in time. He'd stay back at the hotel some nights and just have a Red Bull or a coffee or whatever. But because he was the only one doing it, no one else, everyone went with the crowd.
Yeah, of course.
But you just think about, you know, that Man United upbringing, and, you know, he looked after himself. He did, you know, the extra hours and training, stuff like that. So, you know, if that's what you want to be like, surround yourself with people that do that. Because I know it's probably not as big a culture as it was back when I was a player. But if you hang around with those that want to go to the pub and play snooker after training every day, then you're going to do that with them every day as well. Whereas if you hang around with the people that want to stay back and do an extra hour's worth of weak foot crosses or weak foot shots, you'll reap the benefits of being around those sorts of people.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair assessment, and I think it'd be a good opportunity to the last question to be a positive one. So I think Adi, if you could just say what do you think makes Norwich City such a special club, and how did the fans and atmosphere at Carrow Road influence your time there?
Gosh, what a great question. I think growing up in, I say a small town in Norfolk, so Yarmouth, sort of grew up, spent the majority of my life here. Very limited exposure in terms of like street life, city life, that sort of thing. You know, things are quite laid back, quite quiet, quite chilled in my upbringing. Not much exposure to some of the things that you would see maybe on the streets in Norwich or London or anything like that. And so Norwich was the only club that I had an opportunity to go and watch. So I haven't got anything else to compare it to in my childhood growing up, if you know what I mean. I just remember going for the first time at about 12 and hearing the roar of the crowd when we scored and just fall in love with that noise and that atmosphere and the singing and wanting to learn every song so I could sing at the top. And coming home from football matches as a kid, not being able to speak because I've just sung myself hoarse. That's what I remember. And that's what I fell in love with. And then obviously wanting to be on the pitch while that was happening, you know, having people cheer and shout when you score a goal or you do a good pass, was something that I always dreamed of. So for that to come true, even if it was to get out on that pitch once, I was lucky enough to be more than once, but you know, that's something else to have in the memory bank. I do. It's really hard to describe what you love about the club. I've like fallen in love with it over time, like being on a journey with somebody, you know, dating, you know, you can't fall in love with somebody after the first meal. Some people do, but more often than not, it's a bit of a journey. You know, it takes time. You know, this is what it feels like when things go right. This is what it feels like when things go wrong, and people's reactions and how everyone pulls together. I got first-hand experience in working with or being able to see a lot of what went on behind the scenes in terms of members of staff, you know, receptionists, people that work in the club shop, media people, stewards, all of those people that all club in to make everything centre around our football team being successful. And I suppose you could say that for all clubs. But I just think because it's the club that I grew up with, that I always wanted to do well. I actually really like the green and yellow colour. I think it stands out in comparison to other teams as well. Like on an August first game of the season, there's nothing better with the sun shining down on the Barclay and seeing everybody in bright yellow shirts. I think that looks pretty impressive. And we've had some great times as well. I know things have been a bit bleak recently, but I'm a huge fan of Daniel Farke. Miss him immensely. You know, it breaks my heart that he's doing what he's done for us at Leeds. It does. But, you know, before he joined, I was... Leeds hate would probably be a bit extreme, but I wasn't a fan of theirs. Didn't really like anything about their fan base. I thought negative things about them, you know, arrogance and stuff like that. When he joined, they were my second club. You know, I wanted Leeds to do well all of a sudden, not because I wanted them to do well, but I wanted Daniel Farke to do well. And so, because he's in the not too recent past, I remember lots of games with him being at the helm quite fondly. Last minute winners, last minute equalisers, some of the football we played, some of the goals we scored. You know, and there's nothing better than being successful, getting promotions, and there's nothing worse than being really unsuccessful and getting battered week in, week out and getting relegated. And that's what we had alongside each other for 3 or 4 years, that promotion, relegation. But I don't mind that. I don't mind it at all. I know some fans would sort of happily stay in the Championship and never experience success or failure, just sort of exist and do quite well each season consistently without really going anywhere. I feel like get me promoted, and even if we get relegated next season, we'll just have another kind of promotion.
Well, it's something to strive for, isn't it?
It's not like what we're playing for otherwise.
I think we're probably the nuttiest fan base in England, hoping that we can get promoted, only to know that we're going to get smacked to go back down again. But we're okay with that.
And it just takes one season for it to stick. Just one season for us to get lucky, or for it to be right, and then you've got a whole season of rebuilding again and more money coming in. And But you need to be in the Premiership to be given that opportunity. And so I think staying in the Championship year after year after year without getting relegated or promoted, it just keeps us still while teams around us potentially might move on. We were laughing at Ipswich not so long back because they're 2 divisions below us and they're now a division above us. So,
I think the fact that we've now got the investment from Atanasio and the way the club's set up in terms of its academy structure, but not only that, Carrow Road itself, I think is there's certain parts of it probably need some work, but it's a Premier League ground, it's a Premier League facility at Colney, and more than that really, because there's players that I know that have picked Norwich over like clubs like Man City because of the facility, and for me it's. We if we were to get promoted now, I think hopefully we'd be able to have more of a fist of it because of that investment from Atanasio and his team.
Yeah. I mean, we can't. The only thing is, I would caveat that, Jez, is you don't know to what extent he's willing to push the boat out, because we've seen it with Nottingham Forest, Fulham, Ipswich this season, how much they've spent. I mean, okay, did they sign the right players? I don't know. It's not my job to kind of commentate on that, but I think it's there needs to be a bit of the rub of the green where everything kind of comes together in order for you to kind of make it past that first season like we did under Lambert.
Yeah, it does, but I think as well is Ipswich, not Forest, and who the other club you mentioned, Fulham.
Yeah.
I don't know so much about Fulham, but I think Forest and Ipswich probably didn't have those facilities that we've got and that academy set up. So I think that's our sort of golden egg, if you like. It's coming up to Easter, isn't it? So let's use the golden egg analogy. But I don't know. For me, I think that's where we need to be, and I don't think it'll be. I'll be honest, AD. I don't think it'll be this season, but I think next season, I think we'll have a real poke at it. I think you mentioned earlier on about Ewan Roberts not having a great start to his Norwich career, but you look at someone like Antti Sinak, and I think he's of a similar ilk, where he's, new country. He's only 21.
I don't know if even that, is he?
No. There's a lot of potential. Again, that's that word, potential, within that squad to be hugely successful.
I think so.
And I don't mind, a little playoff run. And giving them all the experience of what it's like to be in the playoffs and potentially like losing a playoff fixture or a playoff final or whatever, because you've got to sometimes feel that hurt to then understand what it means or what it might feel like to be successful. So I want us to maximise our opportunities this season. So, you won't ever hear me say, I'm glad we didn't get promoted, or I'm glad we didn't make the playoffs, because I want us to be as successful as we can be, and win every game. Which is why I suppose it gets a bit frustrating when the games you expect to win, or you think that you will win, you don't. But I also remember when we got promoted to the Premier League and spent about 50 million, and one of those players was Sargent, and we were talking about it being a waste of money and overpaying and stuff like that. And now he's, back from injury, banging goals again for us. And, that's, although we weren't able to do that first season, it just took him a little while to get going for us. And so
that's a really good shout, actually. I completely forgot about him in that sense.
There were others that obviously didn't go on to do anything and have now moved on, but he was the one that stuck out because I think we paid about 17 or 18 million for him.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, no, 100%. Morgan,
is it that time?
I think so. We've got something special lined up for you, Adi. So,
no, I'm worried now.
I'm hoping I got this right. Before we unleash it, Adi, were you on countdown?
I certainly was. Yeah, I thought that was coming. Yeah. Have we got a conundrum coming or something like that, or just?
No, it's a 30-second quick fire quiz between you and Jez. So I asked Jez many questions I can in 30 seconds, and then you'll get your turn with the countdown timer.
Oh, lovely.
There's my random question.
So I get to hear his answers, or are we going to have different questions?
You're going to have different.
Oh.
So this is an epic random question of the week. So for all the listeners at home, this took me about half an hour to think about, which says a lot about my brain capacity. Anyway, Jez, have you got the timer?
Not to hand. Hang on a second. I'll get on now. Yeah, got it.
The countdown theme.
You won't hear anything for now, but I'll probably I'll try and edit it in.
Or the countdown theme.
Yeah, I can tell you when unless you've got the 30 second. You want me to do the 30 seconds, right?
I can do it. Wait.
Okay. We should have had a pre-plan on this, to be fair, shouldn't we? But
that's the bonus of being able to edit it.
True.
Where are we?
Best thing about going on Countdown.
Go on.
Jeff Stelling was the host.
Oh, amazing.
He was great. He was brilliant. We just talked football the whole time.
I bet he liked the fact you're an ex-pro as well, didn't he? I bet.
Yeah, he was full of questions. Yeah, but great guy as well. He had loads of time.
Oh, amazing. How long?
I've got it. Can you hang on? Let me set 30 seconds then.
Well, before you do that, you haven't sung the theme tune.
Okay.
On the jingle.
Random question of the week.
Sorry.
We have a lot of fun on this. Right, are you ready? So I'm about to press 30 seconds.
Who's going first?
You are.
Oh, okay, go on. Yeah, right. I'm ready.
Right. 3, 2, 1. What is your name?
Jez.
Full name?
Jez Davies.
What colour do Norwich play in?
Yellow.
Who is the current owner of Norwich City FC?
Atanasio.
Full name, please.
Mark Atanasio.
Who was the player of the season last year?
Kenny McLean.
Who did Ricky Van Wolfswinkel score his only goal against?
Everton.
What is the speed velocity of an unladen swallow?
Don't know. 32 miles per hour.
I knew you'd get that one. That's a reference to Monty Python, the Holy Grail. Adi, you ready for yours?
Was that 30 seconds?
It was 30 seconds.
I'm not sure I am, you know. I'm not sure I am. I've just had to write my full name down just so I can read it. Right, there we go. So, ready as I'll ever be.
3, 2, 1. What's the current Norwich City kit sponsor?
Blakely.
What is the nickname of Dereham Town FC?
Magpies.
Who presents hit TV game show The Chase?
Oh, it's Bradley Walsh.
Yes. If you could phone one player who wants to be a millionaire to be phone a friend, who would they be and why?
Oh, Matt Jackson, because he's full of knowledge.
Right. They're out of time.
Oh.
So, totting up the scores.
Oh, hang on.
Yeah.
Adie's last question was more of an opinion rather than a general knowledge question.
Well, these are my questions.
Okay, I'll let you have it then. I'll let you have
right.
Yeah, you did. Why not? I would say, Adrian, because you're the guest on this show, that you won.
I'll accept that.
I mean, Jerry didn't even know his own full name.
It's a constant.
To be fair, I think the real winner is quizzing in general. That was some quiz. Thank you.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Adrian or Adi, I suppose Adi, because we called you all the way through. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been
no worries. Yeah, no, thanks ever so much for having me, guys. Appreciate it. Good luck with the channel and the pods.
Oh, thank you. No, it means a lot. Morgan, anything else from you?
No, I just want to say thanks for coming on, sharing your stories and your views on stuff, and also taking part of my ridiculous quiz. So
it's definitely a first for me.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. Well, we'll look forward to listening out to you tomorrow on not tomorrow, it's Friday tomorrow, on Saturday, on Radio Norfolk, and best of luck with that. And
shout out to you as well for the podcast.
Yes, no, 100%. And for everyone else listening, please do follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and X. And say it every week, but you can.
That's it for this episode of Beyond the Barkley. Thanks so much for listening. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and leave a review if you enjoyed the show. You can also catch all our episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And if you've got any questions, stories, or topics you'd like us to cover, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, on the ball, City.